Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue to watch Welcome to Plathville. I'm going to watch this show and react to it and see if anything of interest comes out of my face.
Our relationship with Ethan and Olivia has taken a turn for the worse as well. There was a day 3 or 4 months ago that Ethan came over to our house and told us he wanted nothing to do with us ever again.
That's so sad and so unfortunate to me. Again, I don't know the real situation. If I was really there, maybe I would know more, but it just seemed like there was so much potential for Olivia and Kim to bond and get to know each other and to work together as a team. They were both trying to help the kids, and they both had the ability to do that. And if they had worked together, I think things could have worked out. But I worried in the last season as they were talking, because they would have these sit-down meetings and they would kind of be nice to each other, but they also would never really see eye to eye, and they would never really bond. It was always these very tense conversations, and I was worried that it was going to blow up, and it seemingly did. So that's really unfortunate. I mean, the first season, it just seemed like there was some minor issues with Mariah going like, I feel different, and I felt sad for her for sure. And Lydia, I felt really worried about her as well. But in terms of the scale of things, it seemed completely salvageable, but now it just seems like everything is falling apart. And I wonder if I was ground level with the family, if I would consider this to be Kim's fault in her rigidity, in her inability to be a little bit flexible towards older children. Because for Ethan, the oldest boy, and for Hosanna, the oldest girl, they seem to be very responsible, very conservative, very easy to parent kids. And so they were never challenged with those two. But then when the next two older kids, Micah and Mariah, come along and they want to have kind of normal teenage lives, then that's when the stuff hit the fan and Kim just could not be flexible. And maybe Ethan and Hosanna kind of ruined it because they were so easy that when Micah and Mariah came along, they just seemed like completely pathological. Whereas if Ethan and Hosanna had been a little bit more rebellious, then maybe that would have helped them to see, oh, well, that's all kids. All kids, when they get to this age, they get a little squirrely, and that's okay. And we'll be flexible with that. We'll figure out a way to transition around that. And then this is just, I'm just really sad for the family, honestly. It makes me sad because from the first couple episodes of the first season, they seem to have so much goodwill and so much happiness. There were some problems, but as a family therapist, I consider this to be really tragic.
The children. It's your turn.
We have told Ethan, if they want to see some of the younger siblings, come over, be with all of us, and they're not willing to do that.
Air flows from high pressure.
There's a part of your heart that hurts,
I love all of them, and I just wish we could all get along.
Yeah, so on one hand, you're saying, why couldn't you let the older kids hang out with the younger kids? Why do you have to supervise it like you're like a police officer making sure that no one commits a crime? So that's on one hand. But on the other hand, I feel like a lot of parents should and often will not allow their young kids to hang out with people without the parents at least being within earshot of what's happening, particularly when you have a little bit of worries about what might be said to the kids. So I don't know. It's just unfortunate.
I'll just take a fork. Okay.
So 3 of the older children have kind of gone their own way. But Lydia is the next one in line to leave the nest. And at this point, it doesn't look like she's going to rebel and, go some crazy way.
So I will say that I had the opportunity to work with families over a number of years. And I might get called in as a family therapist to work with the Micah. And the other 2 kids, they seem to be doing okay. And then we might even have one kid that is super compliant. And I might even hear or even observe how the Lydias of the family would just be super nice and compliant and totally on the parent's side against the kids who are rebelling. And then once the rebel kids would move out, the compliant kid would suddenly do a 180 and would become the rebellious kid. Now, I don't know about Lydia, of course, but what that demonstrates is what we call systems theory, which is this idea that a system should be considered a whole instead of just a random collection of individuals. That a system needs to have certain elements. And you could argue, given the way that this family operates, that this system needs someone to tell the truth. Because without that, the system will be off balance. The system needs someone to push back on the parents. Because without that, the system will be off balance. The system might need someone to be the scapegoat, to be the person that is the problem child, such that everyone can avoid their problems and focus on the problem child. And so Mariah was definitely that person. She was the person who told the truth. She was the person who pushed back on the parents. She was the person who drew a lot of the attention and the negativity from everyone else, such that they might be able to distract from their own problems, some deeper issues in the family. Well, now that Mariah has moved out and Micah has moved out, there's no one in the family yet who is of that role, who is the truth sayer, the pushbacker, and the scapegoat, and the distractor. And Lydia could volunteer for that role and be elected to that role. We tend to think of our personalities as, us, that we were born this way, but it has been proven time and time again through observational science that people, their personalities, how they see themselves, how they behave, is largely determined. It's partially determined by one's ongoing personality, but largely determined by the way in which the system needs us to be. Think of yourself. In some contexts, you might be very comfortable and extroverted. In other contexts, you might be very reserved and quiet. Well, what are you? Are you loud and extroverted and out there, or are you quiet and reserved? Well, what a lot of people will say is, well, I don't feel comfortable in those situations. Well, that could be part of it for sure, but that just might be your conscious mind. The unconscious part of it might be that the system is actually pushing you into that role. The system needs you to be that role, and you are willing to go along with it because the system needs that. Like some systems don't have room for multiple extroverted people, or they need a balance of extroverts and introverts. And depending on the system that you're in and maybe at what point you entered it, then you will adopt what role the system needs you to be. And you might even feel a lot of pressure to become that. And so along those lines, we want to look at the family system now, and maybe, and I would guess, that the family is off kilter now as in terms of the system that lives in the home, because there's no rebel scapegoat. Now, I could also see how Isaac might step forward because he is the next oldest boy. So we had Lydia as the oldest in the home, and then we have Isaac. Maybe because Lydia is so conservative and so goody and compliant, I should say, that maybe Isaac is the natural elected child to be the next scapegoat. I don't know. Now, if the family is well functioning and can adjust, which I don't think they can given how things have been going, then they won't need to railroad a child into that sort of a role, and they will allow for people to be who they want to be. But of course, it's my hypothesis that Lydia has been pressured by the entire family to forego her childhood and to completely forego her wants and her needs. We heard her last season talking about how she suddenly had this knowledge that she could say no to things, which I don't know if that was long-lasting or not, that knowledge that, hey, you know what, I can advocate for myself. That's a novel thought. Because usually that's the parentified child's problem, is that they have to suppress their needs, they have to suppress who they are, they have to suppress their assertiveness and their wants, because if they assert it, the family system will react very badly to them. And bad things will happen in the system that will dysregulate the system. And so they learn that they have to suppress all that. And so maybe for Lydia, that is so strong that she can't really be the next rebel in the family. But anyway, let's see what happens.
Year, almost everything. We've moved. Micah and Mariah have moved out. Ethan has told my parents that he doesn't want anything to do with them. And that was really hard for them. It was really hard for me too.
So who knows? But one hypothesis that I would add to the list is that Ethan was raised in such a way that he wasn't really able to think for himself. You will often hear me talk about these kinds of personalities where they're denied the opportunity to get to know their needs and get to know themselves and to get to know who they are and what they want in life. And one of the ways that these people will adjust in life is that they will seem to be very compliant and very good to their parents. But the problem is they're not really in connection with who they are. We've actually seen this with Brandon and his parents actually a little bit. And we might see that in Ethan, I don't know. And the problem is that when you transfer from your parents to a spouse, say Olivia, or with Brandon on 90 Day Fiancé to Julia, it might seem like it's a move of assertiveness, but really you're just transferring your outward thinking from your parents to your spouse. You're switching from, okay, parents, define me, tell me who I am, tell me what to do, to you're switching to your spouse. Okay, spouse, define me, tell me who I am, tell me what to do. Give me the self-esteem that I need to survive. Give me the acceptance I need to believe in myself, because alone I can't believe in myself, because I haven't been given the opportunity to develop the self-esteem and the self-competence by myself. I need someone else to constantly tell me that I'm doing a good job and that I'm acceptable. And Olivia, my total speculative hypothesis with her is that she has some kind of relational traumas before she probably even met Kim that were dismissive to her somehow, something that hurt Olivia, that when she bumped up against Kim's rigidity, it really triggered that for Olivia. Now, if I was there, ground zero, seeing it all, I might change my mind about this, but it seemed as though Olivia had some kind of bone to pick, that right from the start she was really pushing back on Kim in a way that seemed a little rigid. Kim kept saying, "Hey, let's talk, let's bond, let's hang out. I want to get to know you. If I'm willing to talk about this, but let's hang out." I don't know if Kim did a great job with that, but that was essentially what she was saying. And Olivia seemed completely uninterested in that, and only interested in literally pulling the kids out of the home into her home, which isn't going to go over well with any parent, right? So I wonder if for Ethan, he transferred his dependency onto Olivia, and Olivia had building resentment, and Kim did too, and it just furthered that divide, which, by the way, family therapists can help with. But it just furthered that divide, and the resentments built, and the anger was building up, and the rejection of each other was building up, and Ethan just went along with what Olivia said. I don't know, but maybe we'll find out. I'm guessing, hope we'll find out how they feel about the situation.
Father, it can be so hard sometimes, just seeing everything that the family's going through. Father, just help Ethan and Olivia.
I could actually write down my prayers and stick them up as a reminder every day. It's been really helpful.
So I wonder if her prayers are reflective of what the parents believe and what their Christian sect believes, which is, like I was saying, if you're not with us, you're with the devil. I wonder if that's what Lydia is feeling like. Instead of Lydia seeing it like, well, you know what, I can sort of see both sides. I can see Olivia and Ethan's point, and I can see my parents' point. But you know what? It's not my job to get involved. I'm just a kid, and I'm not going to take sides. They can work it out amongst themselves. I still love Ethan and Olivia, and I still love my parents, of course. I wonder, though, if she feels like she has to side with the parents, or she's been so indoctrinated into a certain way of religious dogmatic thinking, that it prevents her from being able to be flexible around that. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with a child siding with their parents and having a religious point of view, for sure. But we heard the beginning of that prayer. We heard, dear God, please help Ethan and Olivia. And I wonder if the prayer goes on to say, help pull them away from the devil, help pull them away from the worldly influences, help pull them back into the grace of God. I wonder if that's language, or if the prayer says something like, I miss them, I hope the best for them. I wonder what the prayers are really saying. Because the reason why I bring this up is because it could play a big role in how this family processes things like this. As a family therapist in graduate school, we almost never talked, if ever. I'm wondering if we ever talked about religion, honestly. But I found that it was really important for me to assess families' spirituality, their religious beliefs, and to really live in that world. I would work with Mormon families. I would work with Christian families. I would work with Jehovah's Witness families. I would work with atheist families. I would work with what I might call New Age families, this sort of thing. I'd work with Muslim families. I'd work with Jewish families of varying degrees of adherence and various different sects of the religion. And these things can become powerful influences, not only on your life, but on the way that you see the world, on the outside systems that are involved in your world. Mormon families, Jehovah's Witness families have usually whole systems around them that are very influential in their lives. And the meaning making for this family, it's possible that the way that they make meaning of their lives is, unless you're living this very narrow path, then you are going to hell. And as a family therapist, I needed to know that. And I never told families that their beliefs were wrong, but I would engage in conversations about explicit belief systems. I might say, okay, tell me, when you use that phrase, what do you mean by that? And they might say, well, I mean, it's important for people to live in the light of the Lord. And I'd say, okay, well, what defines if they're living in the light of the Lord or not? And I'd say, well, if they're doing their Bible studies and they're being good to their elders, okay, so are you saying your kids are not living in the light of the Lord? Well, and they might say, well, only God can determine that. And I'd say, okay, so you're saying you don't know if your kids are in the light of the Lord or not? And they'd say, yeah, I guess I don't know. So sometimes me just living in their world and questioning them in their own language sometimes help them to clarify and move towards a more healthy place. Sometimes I'd be a little strategic about those questions, honestly, because I would hope for some more flexibility around that. But that's how you live in people's worlds and still help them within that world, because sometimes they just haven't really given it much thought. A lot of people, especially when you have 9 kids, you're just racing through your day and you don't have any time to sit down and really think about these sorts of things. And sometimes when you're given a chance by a therapist to explore it, then you find a better way of seeing things. Sometimes not, but that was always my hope.
It can be really hard when I think about what it would be like if Ethan were in my life.
Father, I pray that you would just help us all. If there's something that I should do to help bring the family together, and just show me.
I remember when every time he'd come home from work, he would just bring so much happiness.
So in that prayer, that breaks my heart for Lydia. She's saying, please God, tell me what I should do. What do I need to do? Lydia, as a child, she was 15 last season, maybe she's 16 now. And it would be totally in line with how she sees the world, or maybe how she was forced to see the world, that she's responsible for things. I would have no doubt in my mind that Lydia has at least some, if not a profound sense of shame and guilt, that the family is completely falling apart in her eyes. Another way to look at this is that the older kids are just moving out, and, the family will adjust. And they'll come back around and things will be okay. hopefully that's what's going to happen. Who knows? But look through another lens from Lydia's point of view, this family's completely falling apart. And I wonder if the parents have that language too, because they're really trying to isolate the kids and they're really trying to hold on to what they had in the past. And I wonder if that's what's going on with the parents, is that they had this really idyllic beginning of the family. You know, when the kids would have been, let's say Ethan was 13, because it looks like there's about a 15-year difference between all the kids. So let's say Ethan was 16 and the youngest child was 1. And all the kids are wearing their or not their jeans, but their traditional clothes, and they're swimming in the pond and they're playing their games outside, and they don't care about the internet. They don't know about the outside world, and everyone's happy and everyone's compliant. And it's just this wonderful time. And Lydia would have been right in the middle of that and would have enjoyed all that. And then now you have a situation where everything is so different. But it could have been, there's no way it could have stayed the same, right? There's just no way it could have stayed that way, because as kids get older, they start having their own lives, and it's just not going to look that way anymore. You know, it's interesting when I think about my own childhood. I guess I was sort of like a Lydia. I was sort of like a Lydia and a Mariah in some ways. I'm a middle. I'm actually third out of 4. And when I think about my very early childhood, I have a very fond memory of that time. And then as people, my older siblings got older and more a little bit rebellious or having their own lives, then really threw my family into a lot of change. I think things went well. There wasn't any horrible things, but I remember when my siblings moved out feeling like it was kind of a bummer. On one level, I was really happy that they moved out because I now had the phone all to myself. But on another level, it was a lot quieter and a lot more duller, a lot more boring. Anyway, I wonder if the person I feel the worst for is Lydia. I feel so terrible for her. And I really do worry about her, honestly. I really worry about the shame and the pressure she puts on herself and her ability to know who she is and to get the support that she needs. And she probably needs a lot of support to make up for maybe years of lack of support given her parentification.
In our hearts. I love him so much. And I pray for him all the time. And he's always in my everyday thoughts. And I just miss having him around.
Yeah. For Lydia, her older siblings, she saw them all the time, every day, all day long. And to have them just completely ripped away from her would be really tragic for her and really harmful, like an abandonment in some ways. If you haven't become a patron of the podcast yet, you can do so now by going to patreon.com and becoming a patron of this podcast. That's how we know you like what we're doing. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.